we could take a look at like a few different opportunities on Monad. And yeah, if you guys have questions, just feel free to interrupt or just leave it in the comments. But basically, if we're trying to make money on Monad, there's a couple ways to go about it. There's already live rewards and incentives for different protocols. If you are a liquidity provider or if you're interested in DeFi, right? For example, you could sort by total value locked. And this is Merkle. Merkle basically will pass the reward on to you for depositing into these protocols, right? So let's say you deposit USDC on Gearbox. They're distributing about like X amount of rewards to this total value locked, right? And then you could kind of see like what is the reward APR right now. But what is important to know is that there's like an end date with this, and then sometimes it would like change. So then if you're trying to look at the rewards, then you kind of need to check back like maybe every week or so. And this is a great way for projects to basically incentivize the liquidity where they believe that there should be more liquidity, right? And a lot of these are kind of like lending and borrowing platforms. Like I believe Gearbox is like, it allows you to do like leverage loops on stable coins and stuff like that. I personally don't use a lot of leverage loops, so I haven't been using Gearbox, or I don't use a lot of vaults as well. And I believe that what is the Morpho vault is. And you gotta be kind of careful a little bit with some of these vaults simply because they could like not manage it well. And like some of the vaults did lose money from some of the stable coins, right? Like I think USDX or XUSD or something like that. There was like some stuff going on during the October 10th liquidation event that kind of affected the fund. So like people lost money using those vaults, right? But there is like straight up liquidity pools as well, like MON and USD at like 0.05%. And then there's like, I believe there's Curvens. I believe Curvens is like a Monad native lending and borrowing platform. So if they do like a TGE and potentially if Monad does like a second wave of airdrops, then like some of the native dApps might be getting more allocation, right? But again, with the airdrop farming, it's mostly all like speculative. You kind of need to look at like the total value locked, how many people are farming this, and how much money they raised. And then what is their plan, right? Is there like a points program, incentive program? If they barely raise any money, then it's a likely sign that the airdrop would probably not be worth that much, right? And because investors, a lot of times the seed investors, they're looking for like, they want to be a TGE, and then they're looking to basically try to exit from that TGE, right? So as protocols, if you raise money, you want to try to like TGE as high as you can, right? And keep the token price as high as you can to make sure that the investors, the VCs make money. And that's kind of how like the current system works. And
Richard, I have a question.
yep.
Can you go up a little bit? Like the top?
The top.
You go up a little bit. So this, okay, yeah. So this deposit USDC on the Gearbox USDC vault, the APR, is that only from the rewards? Or like, are the rewards separate? Because there's a protocol APR too, right? That's like,
Yeah.
that's just what the protocol provides, which is going to be maybe 6%, 7%.
I believe that is the reward APR, because if you just hover over here, you can see it doesn't show you like the protocol APR.
So it's separate then, right? Like if I deposit here, so
Yeah.
this one I'll get 11%, and then I'll get another 11% from Merkle.
No, so this is the incentives already, right? The Rabmon incentive.
Okay.
Because there's like 0% utilization right now. So people are not borrowing. So there's no like organic yield right now, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So like the way you make money lending assets is like if there's organic yield, people are borrowing against your assets, right? Yeah. That's why they are incentivized this to make sure the liquidity is available. And then if people want to like borrow against their assets, they could do so, right? But yeah, stuff like I believe like the liquidity pools, like for example, this pool, maybe there is some rewards here But then there's also the trading rewards for the liquidity pool, right? Let me see here. Yeah. So I'm not sure if the total APR is accurate or if it's actually showing just the volume reward or not, but you could basically calculate the fees and work out if like, okay, what is the actual APR? And then I believe the Merkle incentives are like the incentive on top of that, right? So yeah, this APR seems like it's showing the reward APR that is from the Merkle rewards. And then you could basically check if it's actually making like the APR. And I believe that there is stuff like ETH to USDC as well. Yeah. So there's like Mon to wrap stake ETH that is getting some like rewards, and Curvens, like I said, that is getting rewards. And I don't think there's a ETH to USDC reward, but I believe you could. So that's the first thing you could look at, like the Merkle rewards, and then kind of pick out like, okay, which protocol do I want to farm? And then, there's quite a lot of protocols to choose from, right? But you kind of wanted to avoid maybe some of the lower total value locked ones, simply because if you deposit it, then the actual rewards are probably not going to be as high as you think, right? But it's fine as long as you know that if you kind of deposit it, it'll kind of dilute, right? But this is, for example, a pretty good USDC and like stake. I believe that's the liquid staking token that I forgot what it's called, but there's a protocol for liquid staking. Starts with the K, not kinetic. But anyways, you want to kind of look into like each protocol if you want to farm these rewards. But for example, that USDC and stake Mon, like $93 a day is quite good, right? But if too many people deposit, then you will be diluted. But $93 a day, and then the current total value lock is like 2,000 something dollars. So even if you deposit another 2.5 here, you're getting like about $40 a day in like incentives alone, right? So that is quite decent. So that is one way to start farming some rewards on Monad. And before we dive any deeper, I kind of want to talk about what is Monad as well. So if you already have been around for quite a while, you know that there's like a bunch of different chains, right? L1s, L2s. So what Monad is trying to do is like, there's the blockchain trilemma, right? There's the security, decentralization, and then there's the scalability aspect of a blockchain. So stuff like ETH and Bitcoin, it's more like secured and decentralized than most other blockchains. But the problem is it's not as scalable, right? For example, like paying transactions in Bitcoin takes a very long time. If you're trying to like buy coffee with Bitcoin, that will probably never happen, but it's actually pretty fast if you compare it with like you're trying to transfer money overseas, or like you're trying to do like basically a wire transfer that could take a few days, right? Like Bitcoin is still fast relative to that, but relative to like actual usage of like you're trying to buy coffee at Starbucks, or you're trying to like buy some small stuff, buying stuff online, Bitcoin is not fast enough for that, right? But stuff like Ethereum is more scalable, but at the same time, it's not as fast as stuff like Solana, right? But Solana, you could argue that it's not as decentralized, and then potentially maybe not as secure as well as Ethereum. Like in 2024, Solana did go down a couple times when there's a lot of usage as well, right? But these blockchains, we do expect them to like improve in the future. And then maybe there is a blockchain that is able to be like, decentralized, secure, and scalable at the same time, right? So that's what Monad is trying to be. They're trying to be more decentralized, meaning that like more people could easily stake and validate the chain rather than like having to hold too much Monad, or like having too much like, computing resources to be able to like stake and secure the network and kind of invest in the network long term. And then it's also trying to be very scalable and secure at the same time. The transactions are quite fast. I don't know like the exact transaction per seconds. I think they were saying like above 10K, but the actual transaction per second when using the blockchain could be actually different, right? Than like the testing transaction per second. But so far, so good. I've used it a couple times. It's quite fast. It's like it's faster than like the US UI of your wallet actually. So a lot of times like the tokens that I've swapped got into my wallet before the scanner actually kind of picks that up and say that, hey, the transaction already went through, right? So it is quite fast. And that's why there's some projects like Omnia, which is like the Sappy Seals gaming project. It's like a pet battle thing. They picked Monad as the chain to launch their game simply because they're trying to be like the three things that I just said, right? Like it's more decentralized and trying to be secure and more scalable. And there's like a lot of layer two chains, but maybe the transactions are not as fast as Monad, right? And if you need something that is really, really fast, like if you're building an on-chain game, where maybe like every move you make in like a pet battler is a transaction, right? You want to make sure that the transaction is fast enough to kind of make those logs, right? And if everything is on chain, you could also prove that like there's no like bugs going on that is affecting like, the the gameplay or stuff like that, right? And if everything is on chain, you could always go back and kind of like check if it's like a very competitive game and then there's like a prize pool, then there's no like debate on like whether or not like the game is rigged or not, right? Or if there's like a casino platform, for example, if everything is on chain, then it's like provable that, okay, like, everything is on chain. There's nothing like shady going on behind the scene. And like the math and stuff, it's all like transparent, right? So that is one use case for like Monad. But yeah, and if you're yield farming Mon and USTC, for example, you gotta basically realize that you're betting on Monad at least like in the mid to long term, simply because we're not gonna make like a ton of returns over one day, right? Especially if you're providing wide range liquidity. Of course, if you go with the tighter range, you could potentially get like return short term, provided that you could stay in range, right? And as I stated in the course, like the tighter your range, the riskier it is. But yeah, if you're providing liquidity for Monad, you could go directly on Uniswap to try to scan for different pools. Or one of my favorite platform is Gecko Terminal, especially because these newer chains, you're not going to be able to kind of use like the existing toolings for these new chains, right? I don't believe Metrics Finance or like anything else has actually supported Monad yet, simply because it takes time to like deploy these tools. And yeah, you can see it doesn't support Monad yet. And we could check Crystal as well. It does not support Monad yet, but Monad is one of the more hype launch. So I believe platforms like Crystal would probably try to implement Monad. So that could be a scanning tool to be kind of looking out for later on. But if you're trying to be early, like I was, it's very helpful to like know the materials inside the course, right? Because we want to be able to like make good decisions without actually like burning ourselves, right? And you could, for example, compare the APR of like different pools just based on the liquidity and the volume statistics alone, right? You kind of want to look at like, for example, how high is the volume relative to liquidity? How consistent is it? And then also like if you normalize the fees, right? You got to calculate the fees. The formula is like volume multiplied by like the fee tier. That's the amount of fees that you would be getting. And then you divide that by the liquidity, right? But an easy way to kind of like eyeball it is like, for example, when I was scanning for like which pools to be in, I was just looking at the liquidity. And then the nice thing about Gecko Terminal as well is it tries to tell you the trading fee tier. So 0.25%. I know that this pool is on PancakeSwap. It says that here, right? And then this also is PancakeSwap. And then this is the 1% fee tier, right? So we know that, for example, this 0.25% fee tier generates basically 1/4 of the fees for the 1% fee tier, right? So it makes sense that you need 4 times the volume, assuming the concentration is roughly the same, to be generating the same APR as this 1% fee tier pool, right? And so if we look at 6-hour volume here, we basically want to divide this by 4 to kind of like normalize the volume to liquidity. Or we could for example, multiply this by 4 to normalize it, right? So if we multiply this by 4, it's around like 500 and 540K. And then the liquidity is around like, it's about like 2 to 1 ratio, more or less, right? But you can see on this fee tier, it's only about like 1 to 1 ratio. So maybe over the last 6 hours, this pool is probably more profitable, right? And the ratio would kind of change all the time. The chart is not really loading, but you kind of want to look at like how consistent the liquidity is as well. But yeah, that's basically like the math behind it on like when you're trying to normalize the fees just to make the comparison fair, right? And you want to kind of like do that across like different dexes like Uniswap. And currently the two dexes that are like pulling the most volume right now is Uniswap and PancakeSwap. So I would look there if you're trying to be yield farming Mon and USDC, right? But again, you want to make sure that you actually want exposure to Mon. And if Mon does well, then it could be something like Sui, where it could potentially like 3x from here or more, right? But if it doesn't do well, then it will probably like go down by at least 50% or more. So that's something to consider. And there's other things that you guys can do too to try to earn like points and try to get exposure to the ecosystem. You could use like these DeFi dApps. For example, if we're trying to yield farm with more capital, we could do that. But keep in mind that new chain, new protocols, more risk, right? And then there's also stuff like Bro.fun. If you're trying to gambling, it's basically like what is it called? Like beer pong or something. But you want to kind of like look at these different dApps and kind of see if you're actually interested in like using these dApps or that it has a potential to kind of give you a good return on your time and your capital, right? If, for example, gambling dApps kind of like it burns a ton of capital because gambling is usually negative EV, then maybe you shouldn't be gambling, right? And I personally don't like to gamble, but if you guys do, you could always do it on Monad and try to at least get some rewards. And there's like stuff like Rare Bet Sports where you could bet on like currently I think it's the NBA. You could, for example, bet that DeMar DeRozan is gonna score more than 18.5 points here. And then maybe you could say that De'Aaron Fox is not gonna break this amount of points plus rebound plus assists, right? And then basically you gotta kind of link at least two and then I believe that you gotta be right about both of them to be able to like take the money back, right? And obviously if you link a lot of them, then your multiplier would be higher. But then, yeah, this is like basically sports betting. And yeah, if you're addicted to gambling, that could be pretty bad for your wealth. But there's like different apps like Lumitera, which is like a open world game. You could do that as well. There's Kuru. It's like a trading and DEX platform. You could provide liquidity on there, but it's usually for like tighter range liquidity because it's more like a DLMM similar to Meteora, where it's like bin by bin and you could change like the shape of the liquidity pool, right? So you could look into Kuru too, and then you could be doing, I believe there's like vaults on Kuru and it could potentially give you points and stuff like that. I think Kuru raised about like 9 million from Paradigm, if I remember correctly. And then there's like Monad Momentum too. So Monad Momentum is like an incentive program to try to incentivize people to use Monad, right? Can you guys still hear me okay? I'm not quite sure why the internet is not loading.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why my sites are not loading. But yeah, basically you want to kind of dive deeper into Monad. And then if you're trying to make some airdrops or to yield farm on there, and then you could tick on like only on Monad as well. And usually these layer ones are going to be trying to incentivize people to use like the native dApps rather than something that is like kind of expanding over, right? Like Uniswap or like Gearbox and stuff like that. So if you're trying to like go for more rewards, you want to look at these dApps, right? And if we're trying to farm these dApps, we want to basically try to make money from it, right? In my opinion, it is quite risky to like try to get the max amount of like points or like max amount of airdrops if you're burning the fees while doing so, right? Like if you're burning, like, let's say you spend 10K to farm airdrops, if you burn all of that 10K, but then maybe the airdrop is only like 2 to 3K, then it's like a quite risky thing to do. I don't really recommend that unless you're like a professional airdrop farmer that you know like the math behind it. And then you also know that, okay, like which protocol is actually worth burning the money for, right? And the liquid staking is the Kintsu. I was trying to remember that name. And then I think there's Magma too for liquid staking. So you could look into that. It's kind of like those Soul or Rapstakey or like the Kinetic Height. It's like basically a liquid staking protocol, right? And yeah, in terms of NFTs, there is that Illuminati NFT that we were talking about earlier on. The biggest NFT project, I believe, is Chog, and they do have a token. I am yield farming Chog and Mon, pretty close to a full range pool. And basically the thought process behind it is like, if I want to stay long to Monad in like with a portion of my airdrop capital is like, I could, for example, be yield farming Chog and Mon, right? Because if Chog becomes like the main project on Monad and then Monad is also pushing Chog, then it makes sense that, you know, you're kind of long Monad through Chog. And even if it doesn't do as well as expected, at least we're earning the trading fees from like depositing on Uniswap, right? And you refresh here. So currently not doing too bad. I put in about like $2,500 into the liquid pool, earn about like 4% so far over last night. I think over the last 10 hours or so. So not bad at all. But yeah, the yield usually would kind of taper off unless, for example, if Chog goes to like 50 million or like 100 million, then the volume would pick up quite significantly, right? So my thought process behind it is, let me show the setup here. Basically, I started with, on day one, I started with that nested setup, right? So 0.015 to 0.06. So that's the tighter range where I'm trying to get more APR on launch day. That's pretty much like the only time where I would go a bit tighter than normal, simply because usually when a project launch, the volume is really, really high, right? And then once you earn some fees, it's a good idea to expand it if you're not trying to get wrecked by impermanent loss or you're trying to stay in range. So I did use that title one inside that nested setup that is from like 0.019 to max range, right? So I did sell about like 30 to 40% of my airdrop value. At the time, it was around like $5,600, I think. It's like now $5,800. So that's the airdrop value. But because I was in position long with the yield farming as well, but not completely long, I'm still able to be up about like $1,400 something dollars from yield farming fees and also the capital appreciation, right? I haven't updated this yet after the Chalk LP, but I'm trying to keep a log to kind of like make a case study out of this and to just track my profit and loss as well, right? So if I held 100% spot mon and the price is at 0.04, I'm actually down about 500 something dollars. And that is normal if you're trying to like de-risk a portion of your capital, right? Because I did swap like a portion of it into the LP, right? And I'm not doing stuff like a one-sided LP where like it's probably like much less swaps. And it's always like the hindsight is 2020 when we're yield farming these tokens or investing into these projects, right? It's easy to say like, hey, I should have done that after the fact. But then the reality is like, we can't really tell the future, right? The price could easily like go up 3x from here or 5x from here, or the price could also go like minus 90% from here as well, right? And it's just helpful to be comparing these metrics. But so far, over the last 2 days, fees collected was about like 400 something dollars. So that's pretty good, right? Almost like 10% of the initial airdrop value. That's the edge of being early and then also having that knowledge of like, okay, how do I do it in a way that won't like get me wrecked, right? For example, some people were yield farming like really tight ranges. Of course, you're going to print a lot of fees, but then if you're out of range on the top side, then you're in a tough spot where like, okay, should I rebuy some mon at a higher price, right? So it works for like new tokens or really old tokens. if you run tight ranges, you're going to be forced to make tough decisions all the time. Like if it goes down to the bottom range, do I like kind of do the expand and squeeze strategy where we try to minimize impermanent loss and maybe the pool is going to be out of range for a while? Or do we try to like lock in the impermanent loss and try to like outprint with the yield? But then if the asset bounced back, then I would have been like selling Mon at a price that is not really that good, right? And then again, if price exits the top, then I'm forced to make the decision of like, okay, do I rebuy higher to make sure that I earn yield, right? Versus a wide range, you just chill out and then prices go down. We compound in if we want more exposure to the asset, it drags down our entry. Price go up, we could always de-risk with the fees into like stable coins or into other assets, right? And that is much more like relatively simple to do rather than, like an overly complex strategy, like you're trying to layer a bunch of different LPs and stuff like that. It's just pretty hard to manage and much more time consuming, right? So, but yeah, it is more risky but it is a way to basically get leverage exposure on Monad, right? And buying alts that is like more of a beta play, meaning that like most likely if Monad goes up in price, Chart would go up in price, but maybe a bit more. It is going to be like higher risk than, for example, just straight up yield farming Mon and USDC or like Mon to wrap stake ETH or something if you're bullish on Mon, right? But again, we want to keep in mind like the LP pyramid, these assets, if we are actually bullish on these assets, right? We don't want to be like yield farming these assets simply because like, okay, the yield is really high and then maybe I could like exit before the price drop, right? And when we enter, we gotta always think about like the downside. If you can't stomach the downside, you definitely don't want to be putting too much capital into it, right? And I do have an unfair advantage simply because a lot of the funds are airdrop to me. I did lock in of the profit, and this is what we're gonna talk about right now. So I did rebalance those two pools. I withdraw my capital, and then because I did swap some USDC, right? I put it into a bearish range where it's from like 0 to 0.08 range. Then the reason why I picked this range is not really because like I believe Monad is going to top at like 0.08 or I'm trying to rebuy Monad that much. It's just that I want to earn yield. So that's the number one thing. And number two, because I did sell some into USDC and I don't want to rebuy higher, then I want to be putting it inside the pool without any swaps, right? So if I'm doing that and price go down, I'm basically slowly buying back into Mon in that case, right? If Mon drops to like 0.02 or 0.01. And the nice thing about like a max range that goes to 0 is that your exchange rate is going to be really good compared to like a range that is maybe going to like 0.02 or something, right? So that is the thinking behind this 0.0 to 0.08 range. And the reason why I didn't have that high of the upper range is because I want to have more spot Mon to basically ape Chog, right? And I did exactly that. I found Chog about like 30 minutes after they launched. Obviously didn't get like that good of an entry. It's trading near like my entry price right now. But again, because we are yield farming these tokens, even if the price moves sideways, it's very likely that I would be outperforming just buying and holding Chog separately, right? And then again, if I did not buy Chog, then it would be that hammer LP setup where I have some spot back and the bearish LP. And this setup could be good in that like the bearish LP basically lock in a ton of profits already, right? Because I think if Mon drops by like 30 to 40%, the LP value would only drop by like by only like 10% or something on a full range bearish LP. So I locked in a ton of profits already. And if the price of Mon shoots up to like, let's say 0.15, I still have that spot exposure to sell on the upside if I choose to, right? So the hammer LP is a good way to like lock in some profits while also having some spot back to capture the upside, right? And it depends on if you're trying to lock in more profits right now, then you want to have more capital in the bearish LP and then less on the spot back. But if you want to have more upside exposure, then you would want to have more spot, right? But basically, yeah, I'm still keeping track of this. And that is something that you guys could look to do as well. And again, some smart people I know are bullish on chalk, but at the same time, it is a meme coin and I don't know what they're trying to do with the tokens later on. So we got to kind of look into that as well, right? And you guys could basically look into this. They have like, for example, some of the tokens is going to the team and advisors. There's like cliff investing and stuff like that. But I don't think they set a really detailed doc or anything. So it's mainly just a meme coin at this point in time. Yeah, so that's how I'm planning to play with the Monad ecosystem. And if I'm pretty busy with like building Drippy and stuff like that, I probably would not be using a lot of these dApps. But you guys can if you have more downtime or if you're into gaming and stuff like that. You could be using these dApps for like a potential reward, right? And usually if you're trying to like make money in like farming, actively farming in an ecosystem, it's good to like dive deeper into one specific ecosystem rather than like spreading yourself thin across like, let's say 5 or 10 different chains, right? So Monad is one of the higher potential one. And then you could be looking at like Mega ETH as well. So at most, I personally would be looking at like 2 ecosystem and really try to get the max value you can get out of it versus like being spread too thin if you're trying to make more money from like actively farming. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this workshop. And then you guys could check out like their website. Make sure you navigate through like the official links, right? Official X and stuff like that. But you could check out like the staking, the vaults, and then like there's like different spot trading, perps trading, right? You could be trading perps. There's like different perps platform like Purple and Drake. So if you do perps, then you could use those as well. And then there's a Sappy Seals Mint Hub too. I don't believe if it's still running, but basically you could use some lawn and then you could use like the buy raffle tickets. And then I think if you lose, they refund you or something. But if you win, then they basically mint the NFT for you and then would like send it to your wallet, something like that. But yeah, you could check it out and you can see like the transaction per second is quite high on Monad. But yeah, any questions about Monad or yield farming in general? If not, yeah, one thing I will say is that like you gotta keep in mind that if you're yield farming, you gotta look into the underlying assets, right? Like for example, I think it's Agora USD, AUSD. If it's newer, then you gotta kind of be careful with these assets and these stable coins as well. Do your due diligence, and then you want to make sure that you don't like overexpose yourself to like newer stable coins too, right? So, all right. Thanks, Austin. Thanks, AK. If you guys don't have any question about yield farming, we could call it for now. And do you guys have feedback on the course, by the way, or like on the Drippy side of things so far? Like, has the stuff been helpful, or do you hope to see like some sort of improvements? Or
It's good,
there's
Richard.
yeah,
It's really
yeah,
good. Yeah, I mean, I'm entering a lot of like long range, not a lot, but like I'm looking at some, coins and I'm entering into long range LPs. I think it's good. I mean, the APY seems to be good. I've back tested and I'm looking at all the different things. I recently if I'm looking more at DeFi Llama, I don't know if you included that in the course, but I've found it pretty helpful to look past 30 days at average yields for different
yeah.
pools.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. I think I did go over in one of the YouTube videos, but it's not in the course. I do have it on the 2.0 version of the course to like make sure to go over DeFi Llama. But the plan right now is like to kind of build software and also the course. I'm thinking of like splitting because currently it's not really organized too well. It is kind of like everything that you need to know. But then I'm thinking about like maybe splitting it into different sections. Like, okay, like this is the basic stuff that you absolutely need to know, right? For example, how to bridge,
Mhm.
how to swap basic assets. And if you're already like a veteran, then you could basically skip over that, right? And then the second section is like the portfolio building side of things. I believe is important as well. And then the third would be like the core part of it would be still the yield farming and liquidity pools and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Uh,
one piece of feedback I would give, and I think you already know, but like it sometimes can be a little out of order. Like
yeah,
I feel like sometimes I learn one thing, but there's like another important part of that thing that I learn later, like maybe 2 sections later, I learned that in the course.
yeah.
That's just what I felt. I can try to find examples, but that's what I feel like I have experienced a little.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it was kind of like challenging to restructure like the structure of the course, but I'll make sure that I already have the new curriculum plan. I just got to make sure, yeah, like you said, it's kind of logical because sometimes like my thinking is like if I teach you everything before you deploy, a lot of people would not actually do anything versus, maybe I teach you the important basics first and then you're starting to deploy and then later on you've like kind of learn everything but
Yeah.
yeah, I get what you're saying. It is a little bit messy right now, the course. Yeah, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah. It's good though. I mean, the back testing videos are really good. Like you learn how to run the numbers and stuff well. So it's good.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. The simulation part is quite important. Most like liquid providers, they just don't simulate and just hop into the pool, right? And just see, if they could stay in range.
Yeah, exactly. Some of
Yeah.
what I've noticed on Revert is like sometimes the pool is not available. If it's like a base pool or
Yeah.
something like that, it's not available.
Thanks for the feedback and thank you guys for coming to the workshop.
Yeah. Do you know approximately when the new version of the course would be released?
Would probably take a few months
Okay.
at the very least because it does take me a while to kind of like do the slides and then do the filming and the editing and stuff like that. Yeah. But the materials are like pretty much the same. It's just that maybe like it's a bit more refined and reorganized. That's all.
Cool.
But yeah, for people that already took the course, the best way to learn is probably just to ask questions and then attend the workshops like what you guys are already doing. Right. Yeah. I hope that was helpful. And then thank you guys once again for coming to the workshop. Let's call it for now.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, okay. See you, Austin. Thank you.